This is also on Spotify now. Tonight, you are setting out along one of Europe's oldest forgotten highways, following the quiet amber road from the cool shores of the Baltic Sea, through forests, rivers, and mountain valleys toward the warmth of the Mediterranean. Long before paved roads and modern borders, this peaceful route carried glowing amber between distant communities, connecting countless ordinary lives across an entire continent. Before we begin, take a quiet moment to like this video and subscribe. But only if these long, slow journeys through history are genuinely something you enjoy. And if you'd like, let us know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Now, dim the lights, settle in comfortably, and allow the modern world to drift gently into the distance as our journey begins. The morning arrives so gently that you hardly notice the darkness giving way to pale silver light. A cool breeze moves across a broad river, carrying the faint scent of wet earth, reeds, and distant pine forests. Mist lingers above the water, softening every outline until a land seems suspended between memory and waking. You stand quietly at the edge of a small settlement, where simple timber houses rest beneath steep roofs that have weathered many seasons. Smoke rises lazily from a handful of hearths, disappearing into the brightening sky. No one hurries. There is time enough for the day to unfold, as it always has, one careful task after another. The river before you is known by many names as it winds through different lands, yet every traveller understands its quiet importance. It carries boats, stories, friendships, and goods farther than any single person could ever walk. Beyond its bends lie forests so vast that they seem endless, while farther south the waterways slowly guide travellers toward warmer valleys and distant mountains. Somewhere far beyond those mountains waits a shimmering blue sea, familiar to merchants whose families have crossed it for generations. Between these places stretches an ancient network of paths that later generations will call the Amber Road, though no single road truly exists. Instead, countless trails, rivers, and mountain passes weave together like threads in a carefully woven cloth, joining communities that may never share a language, but still understand the value of exchange. For now, however, the journey begins not with distant destinations, but with quiet observation. A pair of fishermen push a narrow wooden boat into the current with practiced movements. Their oars barely disturb the smooth surface as they disappear into the drifting mist. Nearby, a child gathers smooth stones along the bank, while an older woman rinses woven baskets in the shallows. Their work is ordinary, repeated through countless mornings, yet it quietly sustains a community whose place within Europe's history is far greater than its modest appearance might suggest. You begin walking along a narrow path that follows the river's gentle curve. Dew clings to grasses, brushing against your boots, leaving them cool with every step. Birds hidden among willow branches greet the sunrise with measured calls rather than exuberant song. Even the forest seems reluctant to fully awaken, offering only the occasional rustle of leaves, stirred by unseen animals moving deeper beneath the trees. The land around you belongs to an age long before paved roads and permanent borders. Dense woodlands dominate much of northern Europe, interrupted by clearings where small farming communities cultivate barley, wheat, and flax. Their fields remain modest, carved patiently from forests over generations rather than conquered all at once. Beyond the cultivated land, towering oaks, beeches, and pines create living walls through which only familiar paths safely pass. As you continue, you begin to notice something quietly remarkable. Although each settlement appears isolated, subtle signs reveal connections reaching astonishing distances. A bronze knife carried by a farmer may have been shaped from metal whose copper originated hundreds of kilometers away. Fine pottery resting inside a humble home may imitate styles first created far to the south. A small ornament worn around someone's neck carries patterns unlike those carved by local craftsmen. None of these objects arrived by chance. Each one traveled patiently from hand to hand, village to village, river to river. Among all these exchanged treasures, one material holds an especially gentle fascination: amber. Its warm golden glow captures the morning light with remarkable softness, almost as though sunlight itself has become solid. Along the distant shores of the Baltic Sea, storms wash pieces of fossilized tree resin onto quiet beaches. Some fragments are pale as fresh honey. Others burn with deep orange tones or contain tiny traces of ancient plants trapped within them countless ages ago. Long before anyone understood how amber formed, people recognized its unusual beauty. It felt warm against the skin. It caught the light differently from ordinary stone. When carefully polished, it seemed almost alive. You pause beside a fallen tree where drops of fresh resin glisten along broken bark. They shine brightly in the rising sun, reminding you that amber itself began as something remarkably similar millions of years before. Human footsteps ever crossed these forests. Time, pressure, and unimaginable ages transformed soft resin into one of Europe's most treasured materials. The path gradually widens as it approaches another settlement. Here, several families have already gathered near an open space where bundles of firewood, woven cloth, and sacks of grain rest beside simple carts. Oxen wait patiently, their slow breathing sending faint clouds into the cool air. A few dogs wander quietly among the people without barking. No marketplace has officially begun, yet goods are already being examined with thoughtful eyes. Exchanges happen through conversation, trust, and long-established relationships, rather than written agreements. An elderly craftsman gently lifts a polished amber bead from a small leather pouch. He holds it toward the morning sun before passing it into another pair of careful hands. There is no urgency in the exchange. Everyone understands that valuable objects deserve patience. The bead itself may continue traveling long after both men are gone, eventually reaching villages neither has ever seen. You notice how little separates trade from daily life. There are no grand caravans filling the horizon, no dramatic processions announcing distant merchants. Instead, the movement of goods resembles the steady flow of the rivers themselves. Small exchanges combine over months and years into journeys stretching across an entire continent. One traveler carries amber south for several days before exchanging it for salt. Another transports that salt farther inland while receiving woven cloth in return. Someone else eventually carries the cloth toward mountain settlements where copper becomes available. Through countless ordinary encounters, Europe quietly knits itself together. A gentle voice interrupts your thoughts. You've chosen a pleasant morning to walk. Turning, you find a middle-aged merchant adjusting the leather straps of a modest pack resting beside a sturdy horse. His clothing bears the practical signs of long travel rather than wealth. Dust has settled into the seams of his cloak, and careful repairs appear at several places where fabric has worn thin. Yet Everything he carries has been maintained with quiet attention. "My name is Brenos," he says simply. "I'm heading south while the weather remains kind." His words arrive without ceremony, as though introductions naturally belong beside rivers and roads. He asks no unnecessary questions and expects none in return. Experienced travelers often understand that companionship begins most comfortably through shared direction, rather than lengthy conversation. Together, you continue along the path. Brenos walks with an easy rhythm shaped by years of travel. He rarely looks directly at the road, because he already knows how to read it through smaller signs. Flattened grasses, broken twigs, old wagon ruts softened by rain, fresh hoofprints leading toward nearby crossings. Occasionally he pauses to study clouds gathering above distant hills, not with concern, but quiet curiosity. Weather has always been another companion upon these routes. The landscape slowly changes as the river bends away toward marshland. Dry ground rises gently into rolling hills, scattered with patches of woodland and open pasture. Sheep graze peacefully beneath the watchful eyes of young shepherds, who raise a hand in greeting before returning their attention to the animals. Their daily routine has likely changed little across generations. As the sun climbs higher, warmth begins replacing the cool freshness of dawn. The scent of pine gives way to flowering herbs growing beside the trail. Bees move lazily among blossoms, while butterflies drift across patches of sunlight. Every step feels unhurried, allowing the countryside to reveal itself without demanding attention. Brenos eventually speaks again. "Many people believe amber begins at the sea," he says. "They're only partly right." He stoops to pick up a smooth pebble from the roadside. The sea offers it. The forests protect the paths. The rivers carry those who seek it. Without all three, the journey would never exist. He rolls the pebble thoughtfully before placing it back where he found it. His observation needs no further explanation. Looking around, you begin noticing how each landscape quietly supports the next. Rivers shorten impossible distances. Forests provide timber for boats, wagons, and homes. Meadows feed the animals that carry heavy loads. Mountain passes, though difficult, connect worlds that would otherwise remain strangers. The Amber Road is not simply a route of commerce. It is a living relationship between landscapes. By midday you reach a broad clearing where several travelers have stopped beneath tall oak trees. Some share bread baked before sunrise. Others refill water skins from a nearby spring whose cold water emerges silently between moss-covered stones. A blacksmith examines an iron horseshoe, while another traveler carefully repairs a torn leather strap using bone needles and waxed thread. No one appears surprised by unfamiliar faces. Roads encourage quiet acceptance. Today's stranger may become tomorrow's companion at a river crossing or mountain pass. You sit upon a fallen log while eating coarse bread and dried apples, offered without expectation of payment. Such generosity often proves practical as much as kind. Travelers understand that shared meals strengthen the goodwill upon which long journeys depend. Around you, conversations drift gently through the afternoon air. They concern weather, safe crossings, forest conditions, and rumors of markets farther south. Occasionally someone mentions amber, though never with exaggerated admiration. To these travelers, it remains both precious and familiar, valued not only for beauty, but for the countless relationships it creates between distant communities. The hours pass almost unnoticed. Cloud shadows wander slowly across the hills. A hawk circles high above open fields before disappearing toward the forest. Somewhere nearby, an axe strikes wood with patient regularity. The steady sounds blend into the peaceful rhythm of ordinary life. As evening approaches, golden light settles softly across the landscape. Travelers begin preparing for the night long before darkness arrives. Fires are built carefully, using dry branches gathered from the forest floor. Water is heated for simple meals of grain, herbs, and vegetables carried from nearby settlements. Horses and oxen graze within sight, while their harnesses receive small repairs after another day upon the road. Brenos sits quietly beside the fire, polishing a small piece of amber with a strip of soft leather. He does not hurry the work. Each careful movement gradually deepens the stone's warm glow until it reflects the firelight like captured sunset. You watch in comfortable silence. The bead itself will likely continue traveling far beyond this peaceful camp. One day it may rest inside a Roman villa, adorn the clothing of a Celtic noble, accompany a merchant across Alpine passes, or find its place within a family whose ancestors never imagined the forests from which it came. Yet tonight it remains here, held gently between experienced hands, beneath Europe's open sky. Above, the first stars begin appearing one by one. They have guided countless travelers across these forgotten routes, and will guide countless more after your own footsteps have faded. The road itself stretches onward into darkness, not with mystery or danger, but with quiet promise. There is still much to discover, many rivers to follow, forests to cross, and people to meet before the true journey unfolds. Tomorrow, preparations will begin in earnest. Before dawn fully arrives, the camp stirs almost without sound. The embers from the previous evening still hold a quiet warmth beneath their pale covering of ash, and one traveller kneels beside them, adding slender branches until a gentle flame returns. The light spreads gradually across familiar faces, leather packs, wooden bowls, and neatly coiled ropes that waited patiently through the night. No one rushes the morning. Long journeys reward steady habits far more than hurried beginnings. You remain wrapped in the cool freshness that settles over the land before sunrise. Moisture clings lightly to your cloak, and the scent of damp grass mixes with faint wood smoke drifting upward through the still air. Nearby, horses lower their heads toward the meadow, pulling at fresh blades of grass before another day's work begins. Their breathing is calm and measured, a reminder that every mile of this ancient route depends as much upon patient animals as upon determined people. Brenos is already awake. He sits upon a smooth log, examining the leather fastening on one of his travel bags. Rather than replacing worn straps whenever they weaken, he carefully repairs them again and again. New leather is valuable, and every piece carried along the amber road must justify the weight it adds. He notices your quiet attention and offers a small smile. A journey often succeeds because of the things no one notices, he says softly. A strong buckle, dry feet, a wheel that keeps turning. He tightens the final knot before placing the bag beside several others arranged with surprising order. Each bundle serves a purpose. One contains simple food, barley cakes wrapped in cloth, dried berries gathered late in the previous season, smoked fish preserved beside northern rivers, and small pouches of hazelnuts collected from nearby forests. Another holds carefully folded textiles, exchanged many weeks earlier with skilled weavers living farther west. A narrow wooden chest contains polished amber pieces separated by size and color, each wrapped individually in wool to prevent scratches during travel. Watching him prepare, you begin to understand that merchants along these forgotten routes are not merely traders. They are careful planners, quiet observers of weather, roads, rivers, and people. Every decision balances weight against usefulness, distance against opportunity. Around the camp, similar routines unfold naturally. One woman carefully folds sleeping blankets, while another checks the woven basket carrying fresh herbs gathered near yesterday's spring. A young man sharpens a small iron knife against a flat stone, not because it has grown dull overnight, but because steady maintenance prevents larger problems later. Nearby, two older travelers inspect the wooden wheel of a small ox cart, pressing gently against each spoke, before adding fresh animal fat to the axle, where wood rubs against wood. These ordinary moments reveal something important about travel during this age. Roads are not maintained by distant authorities. Travelers themselves must prepare for nearly everything they may encounter. Broken harnesses, damaged wheels, torn clothing, worn sandals, and empty water skins can all become serious obstacles if neglected. Care itself becomes part of the journey. The eastern horizon gradually brightens until pale gold filters through the branches overhead. Birds begin replacing silence with gentle calls from the surrounding woodland. Somewhere beyond the trees, you hear the rhythmic tapping of a woodpecker searching beneath bark. Its steady work blends naturally with the sounds of travelers folding tents, fastening packs, and quietly greeting one another. Breakfast remains simple. A small pot hangs above the fire, where barley slowly softens in warm water flavored with crushed herbs. Someone passes around pieces of dark bread baked 2 days earlier. Another traveler shares fresh goat cheese wrapped in broad leaves to keep it cool during yesterday's walk. Nothing is wasted. Even the smallest crumbs are gathered carefully rather than left upon the ground. Brenos pours water into a smooth clay cup before offering it toward you. Drink while the air is cool, he says. The road always feels shorter before the sun grows strong. The advice carries no urgency, only experience. As everyone eats, conversation remains quiet and practical. A shepherd who joined the camp late yesterday speaks of a river crossing farther south, where spring rains have left the banks unusually soft. Another traveller mentions a woodland path blocked by fallen trees after recent storms. None of this information is written anywhere. It travels entirely through memory and conversation, passed carefully from one person to another like the goods carried upon their backs. You begin to notice that news itself is one of the Amber Road's most valuable exchanges. Long before written letters become common across much of Europe, travelers carry knowledge between distant communities. News of harvests, change in seasons, peaceful villages, difficult crossings, successful craftsmen, or approaching markets spreads gradually along these ancient paths. Information moves at the speed of walking feet and flowing rivers, yet it reaches remarkable distances through countless ordinary conversations. When breakfast has ended, preparations continue with deliberate care. Blankets are folded tightly to keep out moisture. Clay vessels are cushioned inside woven baskets using dried moss. Amber pieces receive one final inspection before disappearing into Brenos's wooden chest. Every knot securing a bundle is checked twice. Every strap lies flat against leather rather than twisting beneath weight. Even the horses receive careful attention as their hooves are cleaned of small stones collected during yesterday's walk. You offer to help lift one of the larger packs onto the waiting horse. Brenos nods gratefully. Weight should rest evenly, he explains, while adjusting the load. The animal feels every careless decision long before we do. Once balanced correctly, the horse stands comfortably, showing no sign of strain. Such understanding has been learned through years upon these roads, where the well-being of animals directly shapes the success of every journey. Before leaving, several travelers quietly scatter cold ashes from last night's fire. Stones forming the hearth are returned to their original places. Little remains to suggest that anyone rested here, except a few flattened patches of grass that will soon rise again beneath the morning sun. The road welcomes movement once more. Your path follows the gentle edge of open woodland, where tall oaks gradually give way to stands of pine. Sunlight filters through branches in shifting patterns that move slowly across the ground as the breeze stirs overhead. The forest feels neither silent nor crowded. Instead, it breathes with steady life. Squirrels dart along fallen trunks. Small birds weave effortlessly between branches. Occasionally, the distant call of a deer echoes through the trees before fading once again into quiet. Walking beside Brenos, you begin recognizing how experienced travelers read the landscape, almost instinctively. He points toward clusters of moss growing thickest upon one side of older trees. They remember where the damp air lingers, he says. Later, he notices fresh hoofprints crossing the trail. Someone passed here yesterday, 2 horses, light loads. The marks seem almost invisible until he quietly draws your attention toward them. Gradually, you begin seeing details that earlier escaped notice. The broken stem of a fern, wheel ruts softened by recent rain, feathers left behind after a hawk's meal, and the subtle narrowing of the trail where roots rise close beneath the surface. The forest eventually opens onto gently rolling farmland. Here the landscape reflects generations of patient work rather than sudden change. Small fields follow the natural curves of hills instead of imposing straight lines upon them. Simple fences woven from branches separate grazing animals from newly planted crops. Smoke rises from scattered farmsteads whose timber walls have weathered countless winters. A farmer pauses from repairing a wooden gate as your small group approaches. He greets Brenos by name. Their conversation is brief but warm, suggesting they have crossed paths before. "The winter treated you kindly?" Brenos asks. The farmer nods. "Enough grain, enough lambs. The river stayed where it belongs." Simple words, yet they contain everything necessary. Prosperity here is measured not through wealth, but through balance between people, animals, weather, and land. The farmer's wife emerges carrying a basket filled with fresh onions and early herbs. In return for several polished amber beads scarcely larger than peas, Brenos receives vegetables that will brighten the evening meal for everyone traveling beside him. No coins change hands. The exchange depends upon mutual understanding, built slowly over repeated meetings across many seasons. As you continue onward, Brenos rolls one remaining amber bead thoughtfully between his fingers. "People sometimes believe amber is valuable because it shines," he says. He pauses before slipping it safely back into its pouch. "I think it is valuable because it brings strangers together." The observation lingers comfortably as the road carries you onward. By midday, warm sunlight settles across the countryside. A narrow stream crosses the path, flowing gently over smooth stones before disappearing beneath alder trees. Here the travellers stop without discussion, almost as though the stream itself quietly invited them. Waterskins are refilled, faces are washed, horses drink deeply before lifting their heads, droplets falling from their muzzles back into the current. You kneel beside the clear water, noticing tiny fish holding themselves almost motionless against the gentle flow. The coolness surrounding the stream offers welcome relief from the growing warmth of the day. Lunch consists of bread softened with fresh water, slices of smoked fish, onions traded only hours earlier, and fragrant herbs gathered from the stream bank. Though modest, the meal feels satisfying after a morning of steady walking. Nearby, an elderly traveller carefully repairs a woven sandal using thin strips of leather. Another quietly oils the wooden handle of an axe with rendered animal fat, preserving it against drying and cracking beneath the summer sun. Again, you notice how maintenance never truly ends. Travel itself is a rhythm of walking, observing, caring, repairing, resting, and beginning once more. As shadows slowly lengthen, the road begins leading gently toward higher ground. From the crest of a broad hill, you pause beside Brennos to look back across the countryside already crossed since sunrise. Rivers glimmer like silver threads between forests. Thin columns of smoke mark distant villages. Fields appear as soft patches of green and gold stretching toward the horizon. None of the settlements seem especially large, yet together they form an intricate network of human lives quietly connected by these forgotten roads. Somewhere beyond the northern forests, waves continue washing fresh amber onto Baltic shores. Far beyond the southern hills, merchants wait in marketplaces, where this same amber will eventually arrive after passing through countless careful hands. Standing here, you begin sensing the true scale of the journey ahead, not through distance alone, but through the remarkable chain of ordinary people whose daily work links one corner of Europe to another without ever requiring any single traveller to complete the entire route. The afternoon breeze carries the scent of wild thyme growing among sun-warmed stones. Brennos adjusts the strap across his shoulder and quietly resumes walking. Without a word, the others follow. And so do you. The preparations are complete. The road itself has finally become home. The first full day upon the road settles into a rhythm so naturally that it becomes difficult to remember when walking began to feel less like a task and more like the ordinary shape of the day. The trail stretches ahead with quiet confidence, sometimes broad enough for two carts to pass one another, sometimes narrowing until it is little more than a line worn into the earth by generations of careful footsteps. Every traveller who has gone before has left only the smallest trace, yet together those countless journeys have created a path strong enough to connect forests, rivers, villages, and distant seas. The morning air remains pleasantly cool, beneath the shelter of towering oaks whose branches weave a shifting canopy overhead. Sunlight reaches the ground in scattered patches, warming moss-covered stones and fallen leaves while leaving the deeper parts of the woodland wrapped in gentle shade. You notice how the forest changes as you move through it. Some places smell richly of damp soil and mushrooms hidden beneath old leaves. Others carry the clean scent of pine resin warmed by the rising sun. Here and there, clusters of wild strawberries brighten the edge of the trail, their small red fruit catching the eye before disappearing behind ferns. Brenos pauses briefly beside one such patch, gathering only a handful. "Leave enough for those who come after," he says, placing several berries into your hand before stepping back onto the trail. It is a habit shared by many who travel these routes. The road belongs to no one, yet everyone depends upon its generosity. Springs remain clear because people avoid fouling them. Trees continue offering shade because they are not cut without reason. Even berries growing beside the path are gathered with restraint. These quiet customs need no written law. They survive because experience teaches that every traveler eventually becomes the one arriving after someone else. As the forest gradually thins, the sounds around you begin to change. Instead of birds hidden high among branches, you hear the distant ringing of sheep bells carried across open meadows. A light breeze moves freely over the hills, bending long grasses into gentle waves that shimmer beneath the morning sun. Wildflowers bloom among the fields, blue cornflowers, white daisies, and delicate yellow blossoms that attract bees drifting lazily from one patch to another. The landscape opens so gradually that you hardly notice the transition, until the sky suddenly feels much larger. Ahead, a broad valley stretches toward a winding river, whose pale surface catches the light like polished metal. Scattered farmsteads rest along its banks, each surrounded by carefully tended fields. Thin lines of smoke rise peacefully from cooking fires, disappearing into the clear blue sky. You descend toward the valley at an easy pace. The path becomes smoother here, its surface packed firmly by wagons carrying grain after the harvest season. Wooden posts appear beside certain bends in the trail, weathered by countless years. Some bear simple carvings that likely mark familiar meeting places, or indicate directions understood by local communities. They are not elaborate signs, yet they quietly guide those who know how to read them. Near the river, the road crosses a broad meadow where cattle graze beneath the watchful care of two young brothers. One leans comfortably against a hazel tree, while carving a small piece of wood with a narrow knife. The other watches the animals, while occasionally tossing smooth stones toward curious crows venturing too close. As your group approaches, both boys offer friendly greetings. Brenos asks whether the crossing ahead remains easy after last week's rain. "The water is lower now," the older boy replies. "The stones show themselves again." Simple information offered freely may save hours of unnecessary difficulty. Along the amber road, knowledge often proves lighter to carry than goods, yet equally valuable. Soon, the river comes fully into view. It is not especially wide, but its steady current reminds every traveler to proceed with care. Large flat stones emerge just above the surface, creating a crossing that has likely served people for generations. The water moves swiftly around them without becoming dangerous, clear enough to reveal rounded pebbles resting beneath its surface. The travelers prepare almost without speaking. Loose clothing is gathered higher above the knees. Packs are checked once more to ensure nothing hangs low enough to become wet. Horses are led carefully rather than ridden. Brenos shortens the lead rope slightly, allowing his horse to choose each step with confidence. You follow. The first stone feels pleasantly cool beneath your boots. Water murmurs softly around its edges, carrying tiny leaves downstream. Each step requires attention, not because the crossing is difficult, but because careful footing keeps the journey comfortable. Halfway across, you pause for a moment. The air feels cooler above the flowing water. Sunlight dances across the rippling surface. Small fish glide effortlessly through deeper channels, while dragonflies hover above the quieter pools near the bank. On the opposite side, everyone waits patiently until the last traveller has crossed. No one counts time lost. A successful crossing is simply another ordinary part of the day's progress. It feels quietly familiar, much like the small moments today when someone pauses to let another person go first before simply carrying on with their own day. Beyond the river, the countryside changes once again. The fields become more numerous, and the trail begins passing between small villages separated by stretches of cultivated land. Barley ripens beneath the summer sun, its heads moving together whenever the wind passes across them. Nearby, women gather flax into neat bundles, while children carry armfuls toward drying racks built beside their homes. The scent of fresh-cut grain fills the warm afternoon air. Several older men work together repairing a heavy wooden wagon whose axle has split after years of use. One shapes a replacement beam with careful strokes of an adze, while another heats iron bands within a charcoal fire, preparing to strengthen the repaired wheel. You stop to watch for a few quiet moments. The wagon itself is not remarkable, yet it represents something essential to these roads. Though rivers carry many goods, wagons remain indispensable wherever water cannot reach. Grain, salt, timber, pottery, amber, and countless other materials all depend upon sturdy wheels capable of enduring uneven ground. The craftsman notices your interest. He runs his hand across the fresh oak beam before speaking. "This tree grew slowly," he says. "That is why it will last." His words reflect a truth extending far beyond woodworking. Much along the amber road has grown slowly. Paths worn by generations, friendships renewed through repeated meetings, settlements expanding season by season, rather than all at once. Steady patience shapes this world more than sudden change ever could. By early afternoon, the warmth encourages another brief rest beneath a grove of ash trees overlooking open farmland. Travellers remove their packs with visible relief, stretching tired shoulders before settling into the cool shade. One woman begins grinding dried herbs between smooth stones, adding them to a pot of gently simmering grain. Another unwraps smoked cheese traded several days earlier. Brenno's opens his wooden chest only long enough to inspect its contents. Inside, polished amber catches the sunlight filtering through the leaves. Some pieces remain rough, awaiting careful shaping by skilled craftsmen farther south. Others have already become beads, pendants, or small carvings ready for exchange. One unusually clear piece contains the delicate outline of an ancient insect, preserved countless ages before the first human settlements appeared in these valleys. He notices your curiosity. "It reminds people that time is deeper than memory," he says quietly. He closes the chest again. The meal passes peacefully. Conversation drifts from weather to road conditions, from successful harvests to stories of unusually early spring blossoms farther north. No one dominates the discussion. Long stretches of comfortable silence separate each exchange. When the group resumes walking, the afternoon light has softened slightly, taking on the warm golden tones that often arrive before evening. The road now follows a gentle ridge above the valley, offering wide views across the surrounding countryside. In the distance, smoke rises from a settlement, larger than any you have yet encountered. Timber buildings cluster around an open central space where several narrow roads meet. Beyond the rooftops, cultivated fields spread outward in every direction, interrupted only by orchards and grazing meadows. "We'll spend the night there," Brenos says. As you draw nearer, the settlement reveals its quiet industry. Potters shape clay vessels beside spinning wheels turned steadily by hand. Leatherworkers stretch hides upon wooden frames where they dry in the afternoon breeze. A cooper carefully fits oak staves together to form a watertight barrel destined, perhaps, to travel many miles before reaching its final owner. The smell of baking bread mingles with wood smoke and freshly cut timber. Children chase one another between houses, while older villagers carry baskets filled with vegetables gathered before sunset. The travelers receive welcoming nods from people who clearly recognize the familiar rhythm of those arriving from distant roads. No formal inn stands waiting. Instead, hospitality remains woven into daily life. Families accustomed to passing merchants often offer space within barns, spare rooms, or sheltered courtyards in exchange for news, modest trade, or simple companionship. A widow named Elena offers a corner of her spacious barn where fresh straw has recently been laid. "It stays dry, even during heavy rain," she says. The horses are led inside first. Harnesses are removed carefully and hung upon sturdy wooden pegs. Each animal receives water before feed, another habit so common that no one needs reminding. You help brush dust from one horse's coat, while Brenos checks its hooves for small stones gathered during the day's walk. Outside, evening settles gradually across the village. The last sunlight rests upon rooftops before slipping behind distant hills. Smoke rises straight upward into the calm air. Somewhere nearby, someone plays a simple melody upon a wooden flute. The notes drift gently across the settlement before fading into the sounds of evening birds returning to their nests. A shared meal follows. Fresh bread, still warm from the oven. Thick or vegetable stew, flavored with onions and herbs. Soft goat cheese. Apples stored carefully since the previous autumn. Honey stirred into cups of warm water for sweetness. The conversation around the table remains gentle. Villagers ask where the travelers began their journey. The travelers ask about the coming harvest. Children examine a polished amber bead with wide, fascinated eyes, before carefully returning it to Brenos, who thanks them with quiet kindness. Later, beneath a sky slowly filling with stars, you step outside the barn. The village has grown almost silent. Only the occasional soft sound of livestock settling for the night reaches your ears. The air has cooled pleasantly, carrying the scent of drying hay and distant pine forests waiting beyond tomorrow's horizon. Standing beneath the ancient constellations that have guided travelers for countless generations, you realize that although only a few days have passed since leaving the riverside settlement, the road already feels familiar. Its pace has become your own. Its quiet routines no longer seem unusual. Tomorrow, another stretch of forgotten Europe waits patiently beyond the morning light. A faint grey light gathers along the eastern horizon long before the sun itself appears. The village still rests beneath a blanket of quiet, and for a few moments the only sound is the gentle breathing of the horses inside the barn. They shift their weight from one hoof to another, their harnesses hanging neatly from wooden pegs nearby. The fresh straw beneath them carries the pleasant scent of dried summer grass, softened further by the cool air that drifts through the open doorway. You wake gradually, not because of noise, but because the world itself seems ready to begin another day. Outside, the first swallows glide low across the fields, chasing insects that rise with the warming air. A rooster calls somewhere beyond the nearest house, answered by another farther across the village. One by one, windows open. Thin threads of smoke begin climbing from stone hearths as breakfast fires are lit. The morning has its own familiar rhythm here. A woman draws water from the village well, lowering her wooden bucket with steady hands polished by years of repetition. Nearby, an elderly man opens the gate to a sheep enclosure, allowing the animals to wander slowly toward fresh pasture. A young girl scatters grain before a gathering of chickens that greet her with cheerful clucking before settling into their own quiet search among the grass. Nothing feels staged. Every movement belongs naturally to the beginning of another ordinary day. Brenos emerges carrying a folded blanket over one shoulder. "Our hosts rise early," he says with a warm smile. "It is only fair that we do the same." Together, the travellers begin preparing for departure once more. Blankets are rolled tightly to keep them dry if unexpected rain arrives later in the day. Clay cups are rinsed with water from the well before being wrapped in cloth. Leather straps receive another quick inspection, while wagon wheels are checked for cracks that yesterday's uneven ground might have revealed. You notice how little conversation is needed. After years of travel, each person understands their part without instruction. One tends to the animals. Another secures food supplies. Someone else checks the weather by studying the movement of clouds gathering far to the west. The entire camp comes together almost as naturally as birds forming a flock before taking flight. Elena, the widow who welcomed everyone the previous evening, appears carrying a basket lined with clean linen. "For the road," she says simply. Inside are several freshly baked barley loaves, still pleasantly warm, along with small bundles of dried herbs tied neatly with flax cord. Brenos accepts the gift with quiet gratitude before reaching into one of his pouches. He offers her 2 carefully polished amber beads, each no larger than the tip of a thumb. She studies them in the morning light. They look like drops of captured sunlight. "They have travelled far already," Brenos replies, "and they will travel farther still. No lengthy bargaining follows. Neither person measures the exchange in equal weight or exact value. Instead, each understands that generosity has its own place within commerce. The beads will likely become part of a necklace worn during festivals or passed down through generations. The bread will sustain travelers as they continue southward. Both gifts carry meaning beyond their immediate usefulness. Soon, the village begins disappearing behind you. Children wave from garden fences while shepherds guide their flocks toward distant meadows. The scent of fresh bread slowly fades, replaced once again by open countryside, where dew sparkles across the fields like countless tiny mirrors. The road climbs gently through rolling hills. From the higher ground, you can look back across the valley, where smoke rises peacefully from scattered rooftops. Rivers wind quietly between fields, reflecting the pale gold of the rising sun. For a long moment, everything appears perfectly still, although you know every household below has already returned to its daily work. The Amber Road depends upon places like these, not great cities, not mighty kingdoms, but hundreds of ordinary communities whose people plant grain, repair wagons, raise livestock, shape pottery, weave cloth, and welcome unfamiliar faces with measured kindness. As the morning unfolds, the landscape gradually changes once more. the broad fields become smaller. Woodlands return. Tall birch trees appear first, their pale trunks glowing softly among darker oaks. Beyond them, great stands of pine stretch toward the horizon, filling the air with the fresh scent of resin warmed by sunlight. The path narrows. Its surface becomes softer beneath your feet, covered by generations of fallen needles that gently quiet every step. Walking here feels different. The forest absorbs sound with remarkable patience. Even conversation naturally becomes quieter. Only birds, distant woodpeckers, and the occasional crack of a fallen branch remind you that the woodland is alive. Brennos slows beside a large pine whose trunk would require several people joining hands to surround it. My grandfather claimed this tree stood here when his own grandfather first walked these roads. He smiles gently. I cannot prove it. He rests one hand briefly against the rough bark. But old trees remember journeys better than people do. You pause beside him. The bark feels warm where sunlight reaches it, and cool where deep shade remains. Countless travelers may indeed have rested beneath these branches across generations, merchants carrying amber, hunters returning home, pilgrims seeking sacred places, messengers bearing important news, craftsmen searching for distant markets. Their footsteps disappeared long ago. Yet the forest continues quietly witnessing each passing season. The trail soon leads toward a broad clearing where sunlight pours freely across wild grasses waving gently in the breeze. Here several wagons stand arranged in a loose circle. Their owners have stopped for a short rest before continuing north. Unlike Brennos, these travelers carry large barrels secured with thick rope. A pair of sturdy oxen graze nearby while their drivers refill water skins from a small spring emerging between smooth limestone rocks. One of the merchants recognizes Brennos immediately. You've come farther than I expected? The roads have been kind, Brennos replies, and yours? Dry enough. The men clasp forearms in greeting before introducing one another. The northern merchant's name is Osto. His wagons carry coarse salt gathered from deposits hundreds of kilometers away. Salt lacks the quiet beauty of amber, yet its value is no less important. Before methods of modern preservation, salt allows fish and meat to remain edible through long winters. Communities far from natural deposits depend upon trade to obtain it. Osto opens one barrel, allowing you to see coarse white crystals glimmering inside. It doesn't shine like amber, he says, with a laugh softened by years of travel. But no family wishes to face winter without it. Brennos nods in agreement. The two merchants exchange news more carefully than goods. Road conditions, bridge repairs, river levels, rumors of unusually successful harvests farther south, a village rebuilding after spring floods, a blacksmith known for excellent wagon wheels, a mountain pass expected to remain open several weeks longer than usual. Each piece of information quietly strengthens the invisible web connecting Europe's scattered communities. After sharing bread and cool spring water together, both groups continue in opposite directions. Northbound wagons disappear gradually among the trees. Your own path continues south. Watching them depart, you begin realizing that every traveler carries only one small part of the continent's larger story. No one walks the entire amber road from beginning to end. Instead, countless overlapping journeys gradually move goods, ideas, skills, and friendships across remarkable distances. By midday, the forest gives way to marshland. Here the earth grows softer beneath your boots. Tall reeds sway gently beside slow-moving pools where frogs rest upon floating leaves. Wooden walkways built from split logs carry travelers safely across wetter ground. Some sections have recently been repaired. Fresh timber still holds the pale color of newly cut wood. Elsewhere older planks have darkened through years of rain, frost, and countless footsteps. Brenos tests each section almost absent-mindedly before crossing. "The marsh teaches patience," he says. "Walk steadily. There is no prize for reaching the other side first." His words seem perfectly suited to the entire journey. The crossing takes longer than ordinary roads, yet no one complains. Dragonflies glide above the reeds. A heron stands perfectly still near the water's edge before lifting gracefully into the air as your group approaches. The marsh possesses its own quiet beauty. Its pools reflect drifting clouds. Its reeds whisper softly whenever the breeze passes through them. Its damp earth supports countless plants found nowhere upon the surrounding hills. Eventually, firm ground returns beneath your feet. Everyone pauses briefly beneath a cluster of alder trees where lunch consists of Elena's barley bread, soft cheese, dried apples, and cool water gathered from a nearby spring. The bread remains remarkably fresh. Brenos smiles after taking his first bite. She knew exactly how much to bake. He breaks another piece carefully. Experience travels many roads. The afternoon carries you onward through gently rising country where patches of woodland alternate with open meadows brightened by late summer flowers. Bees continue their patient work among blossoms. Butterflies drift lazily between patches of sunlight. Overhead, broad-winged hawks circle silently upon rising currents of warm air. The road itself seems increasingly familiar. You no longer think about every step. Instead, your attention naturally settles upon the changing landscapes, the quiet conversations, the scent of pine after sunshine, the texture of smooth river stones beneath your hand during brief rests, the distant ringing of sheep bells carried across valleys. Without realizing it, you have begun seeing the world much as experienced travelers do. Not as isolated places, but as connected landscapes. Every forest leads toward another river. Every river eventually reaches another settlement. Every settlement offers another meeting. Every meeting becomes another thread woven into Europe's forgotten road. As evening approaches once again, the sky softens into warm shades of amber, remarkably similar to the polished stones resting safely inside Brenos's wooden chest. The coincidence does not escape him. He opens the lid briefly. Golden beads catch the fading light before the chest is gently closed once more. "The sky always reminds me where my trade began," he says quietly, "and where tomorrow's road will lead." Nearby, another peaceful campsite begins taking shape beneath tall pines, overlooking a slow-moving stream. Blankets are unrolled. A small fire is prepared. Water simmers gently inside a blackened cooking pot. The horses graze contentedly while twilight settles over the surrounding forest. Another day has carried you farther along Europe's forgotten pathways. Not quickly, not dramatically, but exactly as generations of travelers have always moved. One careful step after another. The fire burns low through the night, never rising into great flames, but holding a steady warmth that reaches only as far as the circle of travelers gathered around it. Beyond that quiet glow, the forest remains wrapped in darkness, its outlines softened beneath a sky crowded with stars. The stream beside the camp continues its gentle conversation with smooth stones, its voice unchanged, whether anyone is awake to hear it or not. You sleep deeply, lulled by sounds that have become familiar over the past days. A horse shifts its weight before settling again. Somewhere high among the pines, an owl calls only once before silence returns. The breeze carries the scent of resin and cool water through the camp, and the night passes without disturbance. When morning comes, it doesn't arrive suddenly. Instead, darkness slowly gives way to shades of blue, then silver, then pale gold, filtering through the branches overhead. Tiny droplets of dew cling to every pine needle, catching the first light until the forest seems dusted with countless small points of brightness. The air is noticeably cooler than it was yesterday, carrying the quiet promise that the seasons continue their gradual turn, even while the journey moves steadily southward. You step toward the stream to wash your hands and face. The water is cold enough to sharpen every sense without becoming uncomfortable. Looking downstream, you notice how fallen branches occasionally redirect the current before it calmly finds another path around them. There is something reassuring in watching water adapt without hurry. The amber road itself seems much the same. It bends around hills, follows rivers, avoids marshes, crosses valleys, and continues without insisting upon a perfectly straight course. By the time you return, breakfast preparations are already underway. A shallow iron pan rests above the fire, where oat cakes warm gently. Dried berries gathered several weeks earlier are stirred into a clay bowl with fresh goat's milk obtained from yesterday's village. Someone adds fragrant thyme to a small pot of simmering broth, and its earthy aroma blends pleasantly with a scent of pine smoke drifting upward through the trees. No one eats quickly. Meals on the road are not interruptions to travel. They are part of the journey itself, offering time to rest tired feet, observe the weather, and prepare for the miles ahead. Brenos sits comfortably upon a fallen log while carefully unfolding a small piece of cloth. Inside rests a simple map scratched onto thin strips of smooth birch bark. It is nothing like the detailed maps that future centuries will produce. There are no measured distances or carefully drawn borders. Instead, rivers appear as winding lines. Forests are marked by clusters of carved trees. Mountain ranges become rows of gentle peaks. Certain settlements are indicated by circles, while familiar meeting places are remembered through small symbols, understood only by experienced travelers. You study it with quiet interest. It changes, Brenos says. The road, the map. The corners of his mouth lift into a small smile. The road changes too, of course. Rivers shift, bridges disappear, villages grow, new paths become easier than old ones. A traveler who refuses to notice these things soon finds himself walking alone. He folds the bark carefully and places it back into its cloth wrapping. You realize that knowledge of these roots cannot simply be inherited once and forgotten. Every journey adds something new. Every season teaches another lesson. When breakfast has ended, the camp disappears almost as completely as it appeared the evening before. Ashes are scattered beneath damp soil. The last traces of food are packed away. Even footprints begin fading beneath falling pine needles stirred by the morning breeze. Soon, the road leads deeper into the woodland. The trees grow taller here, their trunks rising almost perfectly straight, before spreading into broad green crowns high above. Sunlight filters through in long golden columns that shift slowly as the morning advances. Moss blankets fallen logs with thick cushions of green, while mushrooms emerge from decaying wood in shapes both familiar and strange. Walking beneath these towering trees creates a different rhythm than crossing open fields. The air remains cooler. Distances seem shorter because the path reveals itself only a little at a time. The forest encourages attention to nearby details rather than distant horizons. A squirrel pauses halfway up an oak trunk, holding an acorn between tiny paws, before disappearing around the opposite side of the tree. A pair of ravens glide silently overhead. Somewhere ahead, the repeated tapping of an axe echoes faintly through the woods. The sound grows clearer as you continue until the path reaches a small clearing where several woodcutters are at work. Freshly felled pine trunks lie neatly arranged beside the trail. One man removes branches with practice strokes of a broadaxe, while another shapes long beams destined for wagon repairs and new buildings. Nearby, two younger workers strip bark from smaller poles that will eventually strengthen fences around distant farms. The woodcutters greet the travelers with friendly nods. One recognizes Brenos. "You came through last autumn." "I did." "The bridge held." "It held." The exchange lasts only moments, yet each answer carries practical importance. The oldest woodcutter wipes sawdust from his hands before pointing towards several stacks of timber. "We're sending these south before winter." Brenos runs his hand across one smooth beam. "Good pine. The straightest we've cut this year." Looking around, you begin noticing how forests contribute far more than shade to the amber road. Timber becomes boats crossing rivers. It becomes wagons carrying amber. It becomes homes sheltering families. It becomes bridges joining opposite banks. It becomes barrels protecting grain. It becomes handles for tools, wheels for carts, bowls, spoons, doors, roof beams, ladders, and countless other necessities. Without Europe's forests, these forgotten trade routes could never have flourished. The travelers continue onward after exchanging a few polished amber beads for a small bundle of seasoned pine resin. Brenos explains that it serves many purposes. It seals leather against rain. He turns the fragrant lump thoughtfully, and it helps start fires after damp weather. Useful things, you are learning, often possess more than one purpose. By late morning, the forest begins climbing gently toward higher ground. The trail becomes narrower. Roots cross the earth like natural steps. Large boulders emerge between trees, their surfaces softened by thick blankets of moss. From time to time, the wind carries the faint scent of distant rain, although the sky above remains clear. Eventually, the trees thin enough to reveal a remarkable view. You stand upon a rocky ridge overlooking an immense expanse of woodland stretching in every direction. Forest after forest rolls across the landscape like gentle green waves reaching toward the horizon. No castles interrupt the view. No cities dominate the valleys. Only rivers glimmer here and there, quietly reflecting the afternoon sun as they continue their patient journeys toward distant seas. Brenos remains silent for several moments. Then he says quietly, "People often remember kingdoms." He gestures towards the forests below. "But roads remember forests." The thought settles comfortably into the stillness. Long before ambitious rulers redraw borders, these trees have watched generations of merchants, hunters, pilgrims, and messengers pass beneath their branches. Roads endure because landscapes endure. As the descent begins, the trail grows easier once more. The afternoon becomes warmer, encouraging everyone to loosen their cloaks slightly. Soon, the scent of smoke reaches you long before its source becomes visible. Around the next bend stands a charcoal camp. Several dome-shaped mounds covered with earth release thin streams of smoke through carefully placed vents. Nearby, experienced charcoal burners watch them closely. These great piles conceal slowly burning wood. Without enough air to burst into flames, the timber gradually transforms into charcoal, lighter than ordinary wood, yet capable of producing much greater heat. One of the charcoal burners welcomes the travellers with blackened hands and a cheerful smile. "You're fortunate," he says. "We finished this kiln yesterday." He breaks open a small section, revealing deep black charcoal stacked neatly inside. Brenos explains quietly as you watch. Blacksmiths depend upon this. Indeed, without charcoal, iron cannot easily be heated hot enough for shaping. The knives carried by farmers, the horseshoes protecting animals, the axes used by woodcutters, the nails strengthening wagons, all quietly begin here, among slow-burning piles of carefully tended timber. Another invisible connection reveals itself. Amber is not the only treasure moving along these forgotten roads. Knowledge travels, craftsmanship travels, fuel travels, ideas travel. Everything depends upon everything else. The charcoal burners offer cups of cool spring water stored inside clay jars, buried partly beneath the earth to keep them naturally chilled. In return, Brenos leaves several small packets of dried herbs gathered farther north, where different plants flourish beneath cooler climates. Even gifts become another form of exchange. The afternoon passes peacefully. Clouds gather without threatening rain. The breeze shifts occasionally, carrying changing scents of pine, smoke, wildflowers, and freshly turned earth. Each new mile feels less like traveling toward a destination, and more like becoming part of the road itself. As evening approaches, the trail descends into another broad valley where a winding river catches the amber glow of the lowering sun. Several fishing boats drift quietly near the opposite bank. Their nets hang drying from simple wooden frames, while children help untangle them before tomorrow's work begins. The travellers choose a grassy rise overlooking the water for the night's camp. From here, you can hear frogs beginning their evening chorus among the reeds below. A pot of vegetable stew simmers gently above the fire. Someone slices Elena's final loaf of barley bread into careful portions. Brenos removes one polished amber bead from his chest and holds it toward the setting sun. For a brief moment, the stone seems almost to glow from within. Then the light fades. He wraps it once more inside soft wool before closing the lid. Nothing remarkable has happened today. No famous ruler has appeared. No battle has changed history. No dramatic discovery has interrupted the journey. And yet, as darkness settles peacefully across the valley, you realize that you have quietly witnessed the true foundations upon which Europe's forgotten road was built. Not through extraordinary moments, but through forests patiently managed, craftsmen steadily working, travellers sharing knowledge, villages welcoming strangers, rivers carrying boats, animals carrying burdens, and ordinary people, one generation after another, keeping the road alive simply by walking it. The eastern sky brightens with soft bands of pearl and pale gold, their reflections drifting across the quiet river below your camp. For several moments, the water appears almost motionless, disturbed only by the widening circles left behind by fish rising to the surface. A thin veil of mist hovers above the reeds, blurring the boundary between land and river, until both seem to awaken together. The fire has settled into a bed of glowing embers. One traveller adds a few slender branches, and the flames return with little more than a whisper. The warmth spreads gently through the cool morning air, carrying with it the familiar fragrance of wood smoke that has accompanied nearly every camp along the journey. It has become as reassuring as the sound of footsteps upon the trail. Nearby, the fishing boats remain tied to their simple wooden stakes. Before the sun climbs above the trees, the fishermen are already awake. You watch as they untangle nets with practiced fingers, examining each knot carefully before pushing their narrow boats into the current. They do not waste movement. Years spent upon these waters have taught them that patience catches more fish than haste. Brenos watches them for a quiet moment before speaking. Rivers reward those who listen. He says nothing more, yet his words seem to describe much more than fishing. Rivers have quietly guided your own journey since it began. They reveal where settlements flourish, where forests thin into farmland, where bridges are built, and where traders naturally gather. Long before roads are improved or kingdoms rise, rivers shape the lives of everyone living beside them. Breakfast is modest but comforting. The vegetable stew from the previous evening is warmed once more, thickened with fresh barley meal until it becomes almost creamy. A handful of dried herbs releases a pleasant fragrance as it simmers. The final slices of Elena's bread are shared evenly, accompanied by smoked fish traded several days earlier along the valley. No one remarks that the loaf is gone. Every meal naturally gives way to the next. When the camp has been packed, you follow the river downstream. The path stays close enough to hear the steady movement of water while remaining safely above the occasional marshy ground that borders the banks. Willows lean over the shallows, their long branches brushing the surface whenever the breeze freshens. Beneath them, ducks guide their young through calm backwaters where insects gather among floating plants. The trail is well used, though not crowded. Every so often you pass another traveller walking in the opposite direction. Some led donkeys carrying baskets of grain. Others balance bundles of wool across sturdy ponies. A lone plotter carefully steadies a wicker frame holding newly fired bowls wrapped in straw to protect them from breaking on the uneven road. Each greeting is brief. A nod, a smile, a few exchanged words about the condition of the road ahead. No one lingers unnecessarily, yet no one seems reluctant to offer help if needed. The Amber Road depends as much upon quiet cooperation as it does upon trade itself. The morning passes beneath clear skies. As the sun rises higher, its warmth begins drawing the scent of wild mint from the grassy river banks. Dragonflies dart effortlessly above the reeds, their wings flashing silver whenever they catch the light. Swallows skim low across the water, turning sharply before disappearing beneath the shade of riverside trees. Brenos slows beside a broad bend where the current widens. Look carefully. You follow his gaze. At first, the opposite bank appears much like every other stretch of river you have passed. Then subtle details begin to emerge. Deep grooves slope gently toward the water, where countless wagons have approached over many years. Flat stones line the edge of the bank, making it easier to load boats. Nearby, several stout wooden posts remain firmly driven into the ground, worn smooth by ropes tied and untied through generations of use. This place has no great town, Brenos says, no market, Not every market has buildings. You begin to understand. Long before permanent trading centers grow into busy settlements, certain places become known simply because they work well. A calm bend in the river, firm ground for wagons, nearby woodland providing timber, a dependable spring offering fresh water. Travelers remember such places, returning season after season, until familiarity itself gives them importance. Several boats arrive while you watch. One carries bundles of wool tightly wrapped against moisture. Another holds clay jars carefully stacked between woven baskets. A third has been loaded with timber cut farther upstream. The exchanges take place quietly. Bundles move from wagon to boat. Barrels move from boat to wagon. Names are remembered. Promises are made. Routes are discussed. No official records are written. Trust has become the most valuable currency upon these forgotten roads. The travelers continue after a short rest beside the landing. The path gradually leaves the river, climbing through gently rolling country where orchards begin appearing among scattered farmsteads. Apple trees, heavy with ripening fruit, cast cool circles of shade upon the grass below. Bees move lazily among the final blossoms, while children gather fallen apples into woven baskets. One elderly orchard keeper greets Brenos warmly. "You've missed the early cherries." "I never arrive at the right season for everything," Brenos replies with an easy smile. The old man laughs. "If you did, there would be no reason to return." He offers everyone a handful of crisp apples freshly picked from the trees. Their sweetness carries a slight sharpness that feels wonderfully refreshing after the morning's walk. In return, Brenos presents him with a small amber pendant shaped by a craftsman encountered many weeks before. The orchard keeper turns it gently between weathered fingers. "My granddaughter will treasure this." Again, the exchange reaches beyond simple value. One gift celebrates the harvest of this valley. The other carries with it the memory of distant northern shores. By midday, the countryside becomes more varied. Small streams cut through low hills before joining larger rivers. Meadows filled with grazing cattle give way to patches of dense woodland. Here and there, rocky outcrops rise above the surrounding landscape, offering broad views across fields stitched together by narrow paths and winding waterways. You begin noticing how every community shapes the land differently while still working with its natural form. Some build terraces along gentle slopes. Others drain small marshes into fertile meadows. Stone walls appear where rock is plentiful. Timber fences stand where forests remain close. Nothing feels imposed upon the landscape. Instead, people quietly adapt to the land that supports them. The afternoon grows pleasantly warm. A breeze carries the scent of flowering heather from nearby hills, mingling with freshly cut hay drying in broad fields. Farmers turn the grass with long wooden rakes so it dries evenly beneath the sun before being gathered for winter feed. Several children wave cheerfully as your group passes. One little boy stares wide-eyed at Brenos's horse. "Has it walked to the sea?" Brenos chuckles softly. More than once. The boy's eyes grow even wider. For him, the sea belongs almost to imagination. Though connected by trade, many people along these inland valleys may never stand upon its shore. Yet, through merchants, stories, and objects like amber, the sea quietly becomes part of their daily lives. As the road continues climbing, the afternoon light softens into richer shades of gold. The hills ahead reveal something new. A long line of smoke rises beyond the next ridge. not from cooking fires, not from charcoal burners. This smoke spreads across the horizon in broad drifting layers. Brennos notices your curiosity. Potters. Soon the source comes into view. Several large kilns stand beside a clay-rich hillside where workers shape vessels destined for villages scattered across hundreds of kilometers. Rows of freshly formed pots dry beneath simple shelters before entering the great ovens built from brick and stone. The air smells of warm earth. Clay dust settles lightly upon everything nearby. A potter carefully lifts a newly fired storage jar from one kiln using long wooden tongs. Another taps finished bowls gently with a small stick, listening to their clear tone to ensure they cooled without cracking. One woman paints simple geometric patterns onto jars using red mineral pigments mixed with water. The decoration is modest yet elegant. Practical objects deserve beauty too. Brennos examines several sturdy storage vessels before purchasing one, in exchange for amber beads and a bundle of finely woven cloth. He runs his hand across the smooth surface. A good pot survives many journeys. The potter nods. If treated kindly, you smile quietly. Nearly everyone you meet along the Amber Road seems to share the same understanding. Roads, animals, forests, tools, people, everything lasts longer when treated with care. The sun lowers steadily toward the western hills. Your group leaves the potters behind as the road enters another stretch of woodland, this one lighter and more open than the dense forests crossed earlier in the journey. Sunlight filters freely between scattered oaks, whose broad branches shelter patches of soft grass beneath them. Tonight's camp is made beside a clear spring emerging from limestone rock. Its water is so transparent that every pebble resting upon the bottom remains perfectly visible. The travelers refill their water skins before preparing the evening meal. Fresh apples from the orchard are sliced into the stew, adding gentle sweetness alongside herbs gathered during the afternoon. As darkness gradually settles, conversation becomes even quieter than usual. The miles already traveled no longer require discussion. Tomorrow's road will reveal itself in its own time. Brennos removes the simple birch bark map once more. By the firelight, he studies it silently before adding one small mark near the edge. You watch with interest. What does it mean? His expression softens with a quiet smile. A spring worth remembering. He folds the map carefully and places it away again. Not every important place becomes famous. Some are remembered only because they offer clear water after a long day's walk. The stars appear one by one above the trees. The spring continues flowing just as it has for countless generations before travelers first paused beside it. You settle comfortably beneath the quiet sky, realizing that the Amber Road is revealing itself, not through grand monuments or dramatic moments, but through ordinary places made extraordinary by the thousands of lives gently connected through them. The spring continues to flow through the night with the same gentle steadiness that greeted your arrival. Its clear water slips over pale limestone, gathers in a shallow pool no wider than a small room, and then begins the next stage of its quiet journey downhill towards streams you have not yet seen. Even while you sleep, it never pauses. There is comfort in that constancy. The road changes with every mile, yet water always finds its way onward. Morning comes with a soft chorus of birds hidden among the branches above the camp. Their calls overlap without urgency. filling the woodland with gentle movement before the first rays of sunlight reach the forest floor. The air carries the cool freshness that belongs only to the earliest part of the day, when the earth still remembers the night. You kneel beside the spring once more. The water is so clear that each rounded pebble appears brighter beneath the surface than it does when lifted into the light. Tiny strands of water plants sway gently in the current, and a pair of small fish dart briefly into the shadows beneath an overhanging rock before returning to calmer water. Behind you, the camp awakens in its familiar rhythm. Someone stirs the fire back to life. Another traveler folds blankets with slow, careful movements. Leather straps are checked. Boots are tightened. The horses are brushed before being offered fresh water. Each task has become almost instinctive, repeated often enough that no one needs reminding. You realize that travel itself is teaching you a different way of measuring time. Days are not remembered by dates, but by rivers crossed, forests entered, villages visited, and conversations shared beneath evening skies. Breakfast is simple once again. The remaining apples are sliced into warm oats, their sweetness softened by gentle cooking. A little honey, traded several days before, is shared sparingly among the group. It disappears quickly, but no one minds. Every supply has its season, and every season brings something new. As the last bowl is emptied, Brenos studies the sky. The wind has changed. You lift your eyes. High above, long white clouds drift steadily from the northwest. They are thin enough to allow plenty of sunshine, yet their direction suggests cooler air is beginning to move across the land. It will make walking easier, he says, and perhaps remind us that summer does not last forever. The thought feels neither sad nor troubling. Along the amber road, every season has its purpose. Spring fills rivers and awakens fields. Summer offers long days for travel. Autumn gathers harvests and prepares communities for colder months. Winter slows movement, but strengthens the bonds within every village waiting patiently for the roads to open once again. The path leaves the spring behind and climbs gradually through open woodland where ancient beech trees spread wide canopies overhead. Their smooth grey trunks stand apart from one another with graceful spacing, allowing sunlight to filter softly onto the forest floor below. Fallen leaves from previous seasons have broken down into rich earth that carries the unmistakable scent of healthy woodland. Walking here feels different from the pine forests farther north. The air is lighter. The trees seem to invite rather than enclose. Their broad branches create shifting patterns of light that move quietly across the trail as the morning breeze stirs the leaves. Before long, the woodland gives way to a broad ridge. You stop, almost without thinking. The view stretches farther than any since the journey began. Rolling hills unfold one beyond another until they dissolve into a pale blue horizon. Rivers weave silver threads through valleys, where villages appear as small clusters of rooftops surrounded by fields already showing hints of early autumn colour. Thin roads connect them so delicately that they almost disappear from this distance. Standing here, you understand something that cannot easily be seen while walking within the valleys themselves. No single road creates the amber road. Instead, countless smaller paths reach toward one another like streams joining a river. Some lead from forests where amber begins its journey. Others emerge from mountain valleys rich in copper or iron. Still others follow rivers carrying grain, wool, salt, pottery, and timber. Together, They form a living network across Europe, held together not by rulers or armies, but by ordinary people who continue walking familiar routes year after year. Brenos rests his hands upon the top of his walking staff. My father used to say that roads are like roots. You glance toward him. They disappear beneath the ground. He offers a warm, knowing smile. But they keep everything alive. The descent from the ridge is slow and comfortable. The trail curves gently around patches of exposed stone where hardy shrubs cling to thin soil. Lizards warm themselves upon flat rocks before slipping quietly into narrow cracks as travelers pass. Soon the sound of running water reaches your ears once more. This stream is narrower than the river left behind yesterday, but it moves much more quickly, tumbling over smooth rocks in a lively series of shallow cascades. A small wooden bridge crosses at its narrowest point. It is beautifully simple. Heavy oak beams support thick planks, worn smooth by years of footsteps. The handrails have been polished by countless hands seeking balance during rain or winter frost. Brenos pauses before stepping onto it. He places one hand upon the weathered timber. Someone built this without ever knowing who would cross it. He looks downstream, where sunlight dances across the rushing water. A fine kind of generosity. You cross slowly. Looking over the railing, you watch leaves drifting beneath the bridge before continuing downstream toward valleys still unseen. On the far side, several travelers have paused with their animals, while one wagon receives a minor repair. A wheel has loosened slightly after many days upon uneven ground. Its owner, a broad-shouldered craftsman with silver beginning to show in his beard, kneels beside the axle, tightening a wooden peg with measured taps from a mallet. He smiles as your group approaches. It sounds worse than it is. Brenos crouches beside him. Wood speaks before it breaks. The craftsman nods approvingly, and wise travelers listen. Within a few minutes the repair is complete. The wagon continues, as though nothing had happened. Watching such moments, you begin noticing that small acts of maintenance shape this journey far more than dramatic rescues ever could. A wheel inspected before it fails. A boot repaired before it tears completely. A bridge strengthened before spring floods arrive. History often remembers great achievements, yet daily life depends upon countless quiet decisions that rarely find their way into stories. The road continues through gentle farmland where the harvest has already begun. Men and women work together, cutting grain with curved sickles, laying neat bundles across the fields to dry before gathering them into shocks. Children follow behind, collecting loose stalks missed during the first pass. Ox-drawn wagons wait patiently along the edges of the fields, ready to carry the grain towards storage barns before evening dew returns. The scent of ripe barley fills the warm afternoon. Every breeze carries traces of straw, fresh earth, and sun-warmed grass. One elderly farmer pauses long enough to offer everyone cool water drawn from a deep stone-lined well. He gestures toward the busy fields. "We work quickly now." Brenos nods. The weather gives no promises. The farmer smiles. It never has. No complaint accompanies his words, only acceptance. Harvest always asks much from those who depend upon the land, yet generations have learned to work alongside changing weather rather than struggle against it. As the afternoon passes, more travelers begin appearing upon the road. Some head north, carrying woven cloth destined for coastal settlements. Others guide herds of sheep toward lower valleys, where autumn grazing remains plentiful. A pair of monks walk quietly together, their simple robes dusty from many days of travel. One carries a carefully wrapped bundle of handwritten pages protected inside waxed leather. Knowledge travels these roads too, not only through conversation, but, increasingly, through written words copied patiently by careful hands. The monks pause briefly to share fresh figs received from a monastery farther south. Their sweetness surprises you. It is the first taste of fruit that clearly belongs to warmer lands. The amber road is beginning to reveal how climates change almost unnoticed with each day's walk. The forests remain familiar. The rivers continue flowing. Yet, new plants, new foods, and new customs quietly appear as the journey carries you farther from the northern coast, where amber first begins its remarkable voyage. Late in the afternoon, the road reaches a gentle hillside overlooking another settlement. Unlike the villages already visited, this one is surrounded by broad grazing land rather than grain fields alone. Sheep cover the nearby slopes like scattered patches of soft white wool. Their bells create a peaceful music carried lightly upon the breeze. Smoke rises from low stone houses roofed with wooden shingles. Beyond them, several larger barns stand ready for the coming harvest. Children laugh somewhere among the orchards. A shepherd's dog circles patiently around the flock without needing a single command. The travelers are welcomed into the settlement as evening approaches. An empty corner of a large hay barn provides shelter for the night. Fresh water is drawn from the village well. The horses are rubbed down carefully after another steady day's journey. As supper cooks above the fire, a hearty stew of barley, onions, herbs, and fresh vegetables traded along the way. You step outside for a few quiet moments. The setting sun casts a warm amber glow across the hills. For an instant, the entire landscape seems touched by the same gentle color as the polished stones Brennos carries so carefully. Perhaps that is why amber has always held such quiet fascination. It resembles the light itself, not the bright light of midday, but the calm, reassuring light that arrives at the close of a peaceful day's travel. You watch until the last sunlight slips behind the distant hills. Tomorrow, the road will continue its patient journey south, carrying not only amber, but also stories, skills, friendships, and the countless ordinary moments that have quietly connected Europe for generations. The barn settles into silence as the evening deepens. Fresh hay, gathered only a short time before, releases a warm, earthy fragrance that lingers pleasantly in the cool air. Above you, the heavy timber beams disappear into shadows where swallows have tucked themselves beneath the rafters for the night. Outside, the gentle ringing of sheep bells grows less frequent as the flock settle upon the hillside. Every sound becomes softer, as though the entire village is slowly exhaling after another day of work. Sleep comes easily. When you wake, dawn has only just begun to touch the eastern sky. A narrow band of pale rose stretches above the distant hills, while the valleys below remain wrapped in a faint blue mist. The coolness of the morning carries a freshness that belongs to places where fields, forests, and streams meet one another. Tiny beads of dew rest upon every blade of grass outside the barn, reflecting the growing light with quiet brilliance. The village awakens gently. Doors open one after another. Someone splits kindling with measured strokes that echo softly across the stillness. A shepherd whistles once, and several dogs immediately rise, stretching before trotting toward the waiting flock. From nearby kitchens comes the comforting aroma of fresh bread baking in clay ovens warmed before sunrise. Brenos is already speaking with the village headman near the well. Their conversation is unhurried, interrupted now and then by long pauses that seem perfectly natural. "The northern forests remain peaceful?" the headman asks. They do. "And the crossings?" "Most are clear. One bridge needed care, but travelers have already repaired it." The older man nods with satisfaction. It is good when roads are looked after by those who use them. Again, you are reminded that these forgotten routes survive through countless acts of shared responsibility rather than distant authority. Before departing, the travelers help lift several heavy sacks of grain onto a farmer's wagon. The work takes only a few minutes, yet grateful smiles follow every lifted bundle. No payment is expected. Someday, somewhere farther along the road, another pair of willing hands may be needed. The village slowly disappears behind gentle folds of land. Ahead, the road widens slightly, its surface packed firm by generations of wagons carrying harvests between neighboring settlements. Wheel ruts have become smooth with time, and patches of grass grow only along the center where carts seldom pass. The easy footing allows your thoughts to wander with the steady rhythm of walking. Morning sunlight spreads across broad meadows where horses graze in small groups. Their coats gleam softly beneath the early light as they lower their heads toward rich pasture. A young stable-keeper leads several sturdy animals toward the road, each carrying empty pack saddles that will soon be filled in another village farther south. Brenos watches them pass. "Good horses," he says. "They'll travel far." The stable-keeper smiles proudly. "They know these roads better than I do." It is probably true. Many pack animals spend years following the same familiar routes, recognizing rivers, resting places, and villages with remarkable certainty. Their quiet experience becomes another invisible guide upon the amber road. As the morning advances, the landscape begins changing once again. The broad grazing hills gradually flatten into fertile plains crossed by slow rivers and winding streams. Poplar trees appear more frequently, their tall, narrow forms swaying gently whenever the breeze strengthens. Willow groves gather beside quiet waterways where herons stand patiently among reeds, waiting for small fish to drift within reach. The trail eventually meets a larger road. It is not paved, yet it is noticeably wider than those followed during previous days. Wagon tracks overlap in many places, and the surrounding vegetation shows signs of regular travel. Small stones have been laid across muddier sections to improve footing, while shallow ditches guide rainwater away from the road's center. More travelers appear here than anywhere you have yet encountered. A family guides a flock of geese toward a distant market. 3 craftsmen lead a cart piled with carefully wrapped wooden chests. 2 women carry baskets filled with dyed wool whose deep blues, reds, and yellows brighten the morning like wildflowers moving along the road. Although unfamiliar faces now appear more often, the atmosphere remains calm. Travelers naturally give one another space. Faster wagons pass slower walkers with patient greetings rather than frustration. At every small stream or narrow bridge, people quietly take turns, without needing instruction. The road itself seems to encourage courtesy. Near midday, Brenos points toward a gentle rise ahead. There, from the crest, you see something unlike any settlement visited so far. Instead of scattered farmhouses, a broad market village stretches across both sides of a shallow river. Wooden bridges connect its neighborhoods, while dozens of buildings cluster around a large open square. Thin columns of smoke rise from many chimneys, and colorful cloth awnings flutter above rows of stalls already welcoming visitors from surrounding regions. The village is not a great city. Yet, compared with the quiet farming communities behind you, it feels lively and remarkably connected. This place gathers many roads, Brenos explains, and many stories. As you approach, new sounds gradually replace the peaceful quiet of open countryside. Wooden wheels rumble over bridge planks. Blacksmiths strike glowing iron with steady rhythm. Geese chatter near the riverbank. Merchants greet familiar customers by name. Children weave effortlessly between market stalls, carrying baskets nearly as large as themselves. The movement feels busy without becoming overwhelming. Everything proceeds according to patterns shaped through many seasons. Crossing the bridge, you pause briefly to watch the river below. Flat-bottomed boats drift slowly beneath the timbers, their cargoes protected beneath woven covers. One carries barrels secured with rope. Another transports stacks of pottery cushioned carefully with straw. A third has been loaded with neatly cut timber, awaiting exchange farther downstream. Again, river and road work together. Neither replaces the other. Each simply carries what it carries best. The marketplace itself unfolds gradually as you wander beside Brenos. One row of stalls displays finely woven linen from western valleys. Another offers iron tools whose polished edges reflect the afternoon light. Nearby, leatherworkers arrange belts, pouches, and sturdy boots across wooden tables. Their work bears the smooth finish that only years of careful practice can produce. The scents change with every few steps. Fresh bread, wood smoke, dry herbs, beeswax, tanned leather, warm wool, honey, apples, roasted hazelnuts. Each fragrance blends gently into the next, creating an atmosphere that feels welcoming rather than crowded. Brenos greets several merchants with quiet familiarity. A salt trader from distant hills, a woman known for weaving exceptionally fine flax cloth, a bronze smith whose small ornaments are carried across many valleys. None seem surprised to see him. The amber road has created friendships as surely as it has created trade. You pause beside an elderly woman polishing amber beads upon a soft piece of wool. Unlike Brenos, she shapes the stone herself. Small bow drills rest upon her table beside tiny bronze chisels and smooth sandstone used for polishing. One unfinished bead still carries the rough texture left by the sea, while another gleams so warmly that it almost appears lit from within. She notices your interest. Every piece asks for patience. She turns the beads slowly beneath the light. You cannot hurry amber. Her fingers move with remarkable gentleness. Too much pressure would crack the ancient resin. Too little would leave rough edges. Years of experience guide every movement. Watching her work, you begin understanding why amber became treasured throughout Europe. Its beauty matters, certainly, but so does the care required to reveal it. The material itself encourages patience. Nearby, a young apprentice learns the same craft. His first attempts remain uneven. The older craftswoman offers quiet guidance rather than criticism. He adjusts his grip. The next bead becomes slightly smoother. Knowledge, like amber, passes carefully from one generation to the next. The afternoon continues peacefully. Brenos exchanges several polished pieces for a bundle of beautifully woven cloth destined for communities farther south. The negotiation contains more conversation than calculation. They speak of families, weather, roads, harvests. Only then do they discuss the trade itself. Relationships always seem to arrive before business. As the sun begins descending, many travellers prepare to remain overnight within the market village. Wagons gather in open courtyards. Animals are watered beside the river. Inns, barns, and guest houses gradually fill with familiar visitors returning after another season upon the road. Your group finds space within a sheltered courtyard where climbing vines shade the stone walls from the afternoon heat. The horses settle contentedly after drinking deeply from a nearby trough. Packs are unloaded, boots are brushed free of dust. A simple evening meal is prepared using vegetables purchased only hours before. While supper cooks, you sit beside the river once more. The marketplace has grown quieter now. Stallholders cover their goods against the evening dew. Boatmen secure ropes before darkness settles. Children carry empty baskets home. The river continues flowing through it all, just as it did before the first market was built, and just as it will long after today's travellers have continued onward. Brenos joins you quietly. He watches the current for several moments before speaking. People often remember where they finished a journey. He smiles softly. I usually remember where I met someone worth seeing again. You look back toward the marketplace where merchants from distant valleys are sharing meals, exchanging stories, and preparing for tomorrow's roads. The Amber Road, you realize, is not merely carrying goods across Europe. It is patiently weaving together lives that might otherwise never have touched. Above the rooftops, the first evening stars begin appearing one by one. Tomorrow, the journey will continue beyond this welcoming market, following new valleys, new rivers, and new friendships farther into the heart of Europe's forgotten road. The market village wakes before sunrise, though not all at once. A baker opens the wooden shutters of his oven while the sky is still a deep shade of blue, and the first loaves disappear into the warmth long before the streets begin to fill. The fragrance of rising bread drifts through the cool morning air, joining the familiar scents of damp timber, river water, and wood smoke. Somewhere nearby, a cart rolls slowly across the bridge, its wheels making a hollow sound against the thick planks before fading into the quiet beyond. You step into the courtyard where the horses are already awake. One nudges gently at a bundle of hay while another shakes the dew from its mane. Their steady routines have become as familiar as your own. A traveller who knows the road soon learns that mornings begin not with walking, but with preparation. Animals must be fed before people think of themselves. Water skins must be filled before thirst arrives. Small repairs made today spare much greater effort tomorrow. Brenos is speaking with the courtyard keeper, a broad-shouldered man whose family has welcomed travellers for many years. They exchange news with the ease of old acquaintances. More wagons than usual this season, the keeper remarks. The harvest has been generous, Brenos replies. And the roads? They have remained dry. That helps everyone. The keeper nods toward the eastern gate of the village. You'll find company on the road today. It proves to be true. After a simple breakfast of fresh bread, soft cheese, and warm barley porridge sweetened with a little honey, your small group joins a steady stream of travellers leaving the market. Some head north toward the forests, where amber begins its long journey. Others continue south, carrying goods that have already changed hands several times before reaching their present owners. The eastern gate stands open beneath a sturdy timber arch, its beams darkened by countless seasons of rain and sunlight. There are no guards asking questions, only the quiet movement of ordinary people beginning another day. A woman leads 2 donkeys laden with baskets of apples. A cooper guides an empty wagon, intending to collect fresh barrels from another village. 3 young apprentices laugh softly among themselves as they follow their master, each carrying a bundle of carefully wrapped tools. Soon the sounds of the market fade behind you. The road bends gently through cultivated land, where neat vineyards begin appearing upon the sunlit slopes. Their rows follow the natural curves of the hills instead of cutting straight across them. The vines are heavy with grapes still waiting for harvest, their leaves glowing green beneath the morning light. You slow for a moment, admiring the careful work. Brenos notices. The land grows warmer now. It feels different. It is. He gestures toward the vineyards. People plant what the seasons allow. Every valley teaches its own lessons. As the journey carries you farther south, subtle changes continue revealing themselves. The mornings remain cool, yet the afternoons linger a little longer in pleasant warmth. Fruit trees become more common. The forests open more frequently into cultivated hillsides. Herbs growing beside the road release unfamiliar fragrances when brushed by passing travelers. Nothing changes suddenly. Instead, Europe unfolds gradually, one landscape giving way to another, with remarkable gentleness. By mid-morning, the road begins climbing toward low limestone hills. The surface grows firmer beneath your boots, scattered with pale stones worn smooth by generations of footsteps. Shrubs of juniper and thyme grow between the rocks, filling the air with a clean, aromatic scent each time the breeze passes over them. From the crest, you pause beside a weathered stone marker no higher than your knee. Its carved surface has softened with age until only faint lines remain visible. Brenos rests a hand upon it. Travelers have left signs here for longer than anyone remembers. No writing? Not always. He traces one shallow carving with his finger. Sometimes a mark is enough. Perhaps it once pointed toward a spring, warned of difficult ground, or simply confirmed that others had successfully passed this way before. Whatever its original purpose, the stone continues offering quiet reassurance to everyone who notices it. Descending the southern slope, the road enters a broad valley where another river winds patiently between fertile fields. This one is wider than many crossed before, and its banks support clusters of tall poplars whose leaves shimmer silver whenever the wind turns them. The river is alive with movement. Flat-bottomed boats drift downstream, carrying timber stacked neatly in long rows. Fishermen tend woven traps placed near quiet backwaters. On one sandy bank, several women wash wool in the flowing water before spreading it upon smooth grass to dry beneath the sun. Near a gentle bend stands a watermill. It is the first you have encountered upon the journey. Its large wooden wheel turns steadily beneath the force of the current, each slow rotation lifting water before letting it fall again in sparkling sheets. The rhythmic sound reaches you long before the building itself comes fully into view. Inside, a miller greets the travelers warmly, The great millstones revolve with patient strength, grinding grain into fine flour that drifts through the air like pale dust. Sacks of barley and wheat wait neatly stacked against the walls, each marked with simple symbols identifying the families who brought them. The miller wipes flour from his hands before offering everyone cool water. "The river works harder than I do," he says, with an easy smile. Brenno's laughs softly, "But someone must guide its strength." The miller nods toward the turning wheel. "That is true." Watching the mechanism, you realize how carefully people have learned to work alongside nature rather than against it. The river is not forced. It simply continues flowing as it always has, while human ingenuity quietly borrows a portion of its endless movement. Leaving the mill behind, the travelers follow the river for several peaceful hours. The path remains level, shaded at intervals by rows of poplars and alder trees. Their leaves create shifting patterns across the road while dragonflies dance above the shallows beside them. Every so often, you hear the splash of a fish breaking the surface, before disappearing once more into deeper water. The pace feels especially calm today. No steep climbs, no difficult crossings, only the steady rhythm of walking beside flowing water. Around midday, the group stops beneath several ancient chestnut trees whose broad branches offer generous shade. Their trunks are thick and deeply furrowed, suggesting centuries of quiet growth. Lunch is prepared without ceremony. Fresh bread from the market, soft goat cheese. Dried figs traded that morning. Cool water drawn from the river after careful filtering through clean linen. Nearby, 2 children gather fallen chestnuts into woven baskets, while their grandmother shells several already dried from the previous season. She notices your curiosity. "When winter comes," she says, "these remember the summer." The simple remark lingers pleasantly in your thoughts. So much along the amber road is an act of remembering. Stored grain remembers fertile fields. Salt remembers distant deposits beneath the earth. Timber remembers forests. Amber remembers ancient trees whose resin flowed millions of years before anyone imagined roads stretching across Europe. The afternoon carries you onward through increasingly fertile countryside. Villages become slightly larger. Stone appears more often alongside timber in the construction of homes and bridges. Small orchards spread across sunny slopes, while vineyards continue following the contours of the hills. The conversations between travelers also begin reflecting these gradual changes. You hear discussions of grape harvests alongside grain. Olive oil is mentioned for the first time, carried northward in carefully sealed clay jars. One merchant speaks of markets beyond the mountains, where entirely different languages fill the streets. Yet amber still commands quiet admiration. Every mile seems to reveal another connection. Far northern forests, Central European rivers, southern valleys, mountain passes still waiting ahead. Each depends upon the others in ways that no single traveler fully witnesses. By late afternoon, the road reaches another bridge. Unlike the sturdy timber crossings encountered earlier, this one rests upon carefully fitted stone piers supporting a broad wooden deck above the water. Moss grows between some of the stones nearest the river, while swallows have built small nests beneath the sheltered arches. The bridge has clearly stood here for many years. Its builders understood both the river's strength and the patience required to work with it. Halfway across, you pause. The water below reflects the sky so clearly that clouds appear to drift both above and beneath you. Boats move silently downstream. A fisherman raises one hand in greeting. The current carries him onward. On the opposite bank, Brenos waits without hurry. Beautiful? You nod. He answers with a quiet, thoughtful smile. Then the builders succeeded. The evening finds your group approaching another small settlement nestled beside the river, where vineyards climb the surrounding hills. The houses here are built from a mixture of timber frames and pale local stone. Flowering herbs grow beside many doorways, filling the cooling air with pleasant fragrance. An elderly couple welcomes travelers into their orchard for the night. Blankets are spread beneath rows of apple trees whose branches sway gently in the evening breeze. As supper cooks over a modest fire, the last sunlight filters through clusters of ripening fruit overhead. Golden light touches Brenos's wooden chest. For a brief moment, he opens it. The polished amber inside glows, with exactly the same warmth as the setting sun passing through the orchard leaves. No one speaks. There is nothing that needs saying. The journey itself has become enough. Tomorrow, the road will continue beyond these peaceful vineyards, carrying you ever closer to the warmer lands where amber completes one stage of its remarkable passage across Europe, while countless other journeys quietly begin in return. The orchard rests beneath a sky so clear that the stars seem close enough to touch. Their light filters gently through the leaves above your blanket, creating shifting patterns that move whenever the evening breeze stirs the branches. Somewhere beyond the rows of apple trees, the river continues its steady passage through the valley, its quiet murmur blending with the occasional call of a night bird hidden among the vineyards. Long after the last conversation has faded, the fragrance of ripe fruit lingers in the cool air. Fallen apples rest undisturbed in the grass, waiting to be gathered with the morning light. The horses sleep peacefully beneath a simple shelter near the edge of the orchard, and every now and then one lets out a slow breath before settling once more. The entire valley feels content to remain exactly as it is until dawn returns. When morning finally arrives, it does so with remarkable softness. The first sounds of the harvest reach you before the sunlight does. Wooden baskets are lifted, quiet voices drift between the rows of vines, and the sweet fragrance of ripening grapes settles gently in the cool morning air. Each leaf carries tiny drops of moisture that catch the first pale sunlight, making the vineyards appear dusted with silver. The eastern sky brightens gradually, and with it comes the familiar rhythm of another day beginning along the amber road. The elderly couple who welcomed the travelers are already awake. The old man walks slowly through the orchard, carrying a woven basket over one arm. Rather than picking fruit at random, he pauses before each tree, examining every apple with practiced care. Some remain on the branches for another day. Others have reached exactly the right moment to harvest. His wife follows behind with a smaller basket, humming quietly as she gathers wind-fallen fruit suitable for drying. Nothing is wasted. The finest apples will be eaten fresh or traded in nearby markets. Others will become preserves for winter. Those too bruised for storage will be pressed into sweet cider, shared during colder months. Watching them work, you see once again how every season asks for different skills, and how generations of quiet observation have taught people exactly when to act. Brenos accepts 2 freshly picked apples with sincere thanks. The road feeds us well. the old woman smiles. The road also brings us friends. Those simple words remain with you long after the orchard disappears behind a gentle rise. The morning path follows the river once more, though it now flows through broader countryside than before. Vineyards cover the lower slopes, while fields of grain occupy the flatter ground nearest the water. Here and there, small stone terraces hold gardens where beans, onions, herbs, and leafy vegetables grow in orderly rows. The road itself has become smoother. Years of regular travel have packed the earth until each step feels comfortable beneath your boots. Wagon tracks run side by side, their edges softened by countless seasons of use. Grass grows only where wheels rarely pass. Travellers appear steadily throughout the morning. A shepherd guides several hundred sheep toward fresh pasture farther upstream. Two sisters lead a patient mule, carrying baskets filled with dyed wool destined for another market. An elderly basket maker balances freshly woven willow baskets across a small handcart, their pale wood still carrying the scent of the riverbanks where the branches were cut. Each meeting lasts only moments. A greeting, a question about the weather, a few words concerning the condition of bridges ahead. Then everyone continues at their own pace. No one seems surprised by strangers. The road has made strangers familiar. Before long, you notice the landscape beginning another quiet transformation. The valley narrows, the surrounding hills become steeper, exposing broad faces of pale limestone interrupted by scattered pines, clinging stubbornly to narrow ledges. Wild thyme grows between the rocks, releasing its fragrance beneath the warmth of the morning sun. The river responds as well. Its broad, unhurried current gradually gathers speed, winding through shallower channels where water tumbles gently over smooth stone shelves before collecting once again in calm pools. You stop beside one such pool. The water is astonishingly clear. Small trout hold themselves almost motionless against the gentle current, making tiny adjustments with their fins while waiting for insects drifting downstream. Nearby, a fisherman sits quietly upon a flat rock. His line barely disturbs the surface. He acknowledges the travellers with a friendly nod, but never breaks the silence surrounding his work. Brenos lowers his voice almost instinctively. Some places ask us to speak less. You understand immediately. The valley itself seems to encourage stillness. Even footsteps sound softer here. The road climbs gradually away from the river and enters a woodland unlike those encountered farther north. Tall chestnut trees spread wide crowns overhead, while scattered walnut trees cast broad patches of shade across the trail. Their leaves rustle differently from pine needles, producing a fuller, gentler sound whenever the breeze passes through them. The forest floor is open enough to allow sunlight to reach patches of wildflowers growing beneath the trees. Bees move patiently among blossoms, and butterflies drift lazily between shafts of warm light. The air carries a richer fragrance now. Dry leaves, warm earth, crushed herbs, ripening nuts. Every few minutes, another scent quietly replaces the last. Midway through the woodland, the travellers encounter a small group of craftsmen resting beside the road. Their wagon is unusual. Instead of carrying grain or cloth, it holds neatly stacked blocks of pale stone wrapped carefully in straw. One of the craftsmen notices your curiosity. "Good limestone," he explains, "from the quarry beyond the ridge." He brushes stone dust from his sleeves. It travels south to builders who cannot find this quality nearby. You run your hand gently across one block. Its surface feels cool, despite the growing warmth of the day. The edges have already been shaped with remarkable precision. Brenos smiles. Every village sends something. The stonemason nods, and every village receives something. The exchange reminds you once again that the amber road carries far more than its famous golden resin. Stone, timber, salt, metal, food, ideas, craftsmanship. Everything moves patiently between communities whose strengths differ from one another. By midday, the trail reaches a sheltered meadow where a clear spring emerges beneath an overhanging rock. Several travelers have already paused there. Some refill water skins. Others rest tired feet upon the cool grass. A mother helps her young son wash dust from his hands before sharing fresh bread and soft cheese beneath the shade of an ash tree. Your own group settles nearby. Lunch is simple but satisfying. The apples from the orchard remain crisp. A handful of walnuts traded that morning adds welcome richness to the meal. Fresh herbs gathered beside the spring lend fragrance to warm barley broth simmering gently over a small fire. No one rushes. The afternoon still offers many comfortable hours for walking. While everyone rests, Brenos removes one polished amber bead from his pouch. Instead of trading it, he simply turns it slowly in the sunlight. The golden stone catches the light differently from every angle. For a brief moment, tiny air bubbles trapped inside thousands upon thousands of years ago become visible. "It carries time," he says quietly. You look more closely. The bead truly seems different now. Not merely beautiful, ancient. It has witnessed ages beyond imagination before ever reaching human hands. No wonder so many people treasure it. It offers a quiet connection, not only between distant places, but between distant ages. The afternoon road follows the base of the hills, alternating between open meadows and shaded groves, where streams descend from higher ground to join the river below. Each crossing is marked by sturdy wooden footbridges, maintained with evident care. Fresh timbers appear beside older beams, showing where repairs have recently been completed. Someone, somewhere, continues looking after the road even after travelers have passed. As the sun begins lowering toward the western hills, the valley opens once more. Ahead lies another farming settlement surrounded by orchards, vineyards, and broad fields where families work together gathering the first grapes of the season. Laughter drifts gently across the warm evening air. Large woven baskets slowly fill with heavy clusters of fruit. Children carry smaller baskets behind the adults, proudly contributing what they can. The harvest feels less like hurried labor and more like a familiar gathering repeated each year. Your group is welcome to camp beside the edge of one vineyard, where rows of vines stretch toward the fading light. As supper cooks, the scent of crushed grapes mingles with wood smoke and fresh herbs. Above the hills, the sky gradually deepens from gold to amber, then from amber to rose, before finally settling into the rich blue of approaching night. Brenos watches the colors without speaking. You find yourself doing the same. Some journeys reveal themselves through famous places, others through remarkable events. But this forgotten road continues offering something quieter. It teaches that history is often carried forward by ordinary mornings, careful hands, shared meals, well-tended bridges, patient rivers, and people who keep walking season after season without ever imagining that centuries later their peaceful journeys would still be remembered. The vineyard settles into evening with the same quiet patience that has guided every day of the journey. The last baskets of grapes are carried from the rows, and the workers wash the purple stain from their hands in wooden tubs filled with cool spring water. Laughter fades into gentle conversation as families gather for their evening meals. Smoke rises in slender columns from nearby homes before drifting across the valley, carrying the comforting scent of bread, herbs, and slow-cooking vegetables. Your own camp is small by comparison, yet it feels equally welcoming. The horses graze contentedly along the edge of the field, occasionally lifting their heads as swallows dart low above the vines in search of insects. The fire burns quietly, needing only an occasional branch to keep its warmth through the evening. Brenos accepts a wooden cup of freshly pressed grape juice from the vineyard owner. It is cloudy, cool, and lightly sweet, carrying the taste of fruit that had been hanging upon the vine only hours before. The first pressing, the owner says with quiet pride. Brenos nods appreciatively. It reminds us how quickly the seasons move, the owner smiles. They always have. As darkness settles over the valley, lanterns begin appearing among the nearby homes. Their warm light glows softly through small windows, reflecting faintly upon polished clay jars lined neatly outside each doorway. Somewhere in the distance, a shepherd plays a simple tune upon a reed flute. The melody is unhurried, rising and falling as naturally as the breeze itself before gradually disappearing into the night. Sleep comes easily once again. When morning arrives, the vineyard is already alive with gentle activity. The harvest continues before the day's warmth grows too strong. Dew still clings to the grape leaves, and each cluster glistens briefly before the rising sun dries the moisture away. You help coil a length of rope that had secured one of the travelers' packs overnight. Nearby, another member of the group oils the leather harness of a horse while checking every buckle for signs of wear. These small routines now feel familiar enough that they hardly require thought. Along the amber road, careful preparation has become another form of peace. After sharing warm bread, soft cheese, and a handful of dried plums purchased the previous afternoon, the travelers thank their hosts and continue south. The road soon begins following the contours of the valley rather than its floor. From this slightly higher path, you can see broad patches of cultivated land stretching beside the river below. Wheat fields ready for harvest alternate with orchards, vineyards, and small groves of walnut and fig trees. The entire landscape seems shaped through generations of careful observation rather than sudden change. Stone boundary walls become more common here. They wind gently across the hillsides, following natural curves instead of forcing straight lines through the land. Moss grows between the stones, and tiny wildflowers find enough soil within the narrow gaps to bloom each season. Brenos rests a hand upon one section as you pass. Some of these walls are older than anyone living nearby. You study the carefully fitted stones. They've lasted well. They last because someone repairs them every year. Again, the lesson arrives quietly. Nothing endures through neglect. Roads, bridges, walls, friendships, and traditions all survive because ordinary people continue caring for them one season after another. The morning remains pleasantly cool despite the southern latitude. A light breeze carries the fragrance of rosemary growing wild among the rocky slopes. Bees drift lazily from flower to flower and lizards bask upon warm stones before slipping out of sight whenever footsteps approach. Before long, the travellers reach a place where the valley narrows dramatically. Towering limestone cliffs rise on both sides, their pale faces marked by countless layers deposited over unimaginable stretches of time. The river has patiently carved its passage between them, leaving only enough level ground for the road to continue beside the water. Walking here feels different. The cliffs soften every sound, voices seem quieter. Even the river, though flowing steadily, echoes gently against the stone before disappearing around the next bend. You notice small openings high upon one cliff. Natural caves, some a little more than dark hollows. Others reach deep into the rock, their entrances framed by hanging plants and weathered stone. Brennos follows your gaze. People have sheltered there. Travellers and shepherds, sometimes hunters. A faint smile touches his lips. The hills have offered hospitality long before villages did. The path curves beneath an overhanging cliff where cool air flows continuously from the shaded stone. The sudden change in temperature feels refreshing after the growing warmth of the morning. Nearby, a spring emerges directly from the rock face, its water falling into a shallow basin before spilling into the river. Several travellers have stopped there. A woman fills clay jars. 2 boys splash cool water across their faces while laughing softly. An elderly man simply sits upon a smooth boulder, listening to the sound of the fall in water without appearing in any hurry to continue. Your own group pauses as well. The spring tastes remarkably fresh, cooler than the streams crossed earlier. Minerals dissolved within the limestone give it a clean, slightly sweet character, unlike any water you have yet sampled. Brennos fills every water skin before replacing the stoppers carefully. Never hurry past good water. The advice seems simple enough to apply far beyond the journey itself. Continuing onward, the valley gradually widens once again. The cliffs retreat. Fields return. The road becomes busier than it has been for several days. A long caravan approaches from the south. Instead of amber, its pack animals carry large clay amphorae, secured inside wicker frames. Their narrow necks have been sealed carefully with wax and cloth. The caravan leader exchanges warm greetings with Brennos. You've come a long way. So have you. What do you carry north? Amber. The other man smiles knowingly. And I carry olive oil. Neither seems surprised by the other's answer. For generations, these 2 products have quietly travelled in opposite directions, linking distant landscapes that might otherwise never meet. While the animals rest briefly beside the road, you examine one of the amphorae. Its surface bears a simple maker's mark pressed into the clay before firing. No decoration, only quiet confidence in careful craftsmanship. The caravan leader notices your interest. It began life beside the southern sea. He pats the jar gently. If all goes well, it will return there many years from now. The thought is unexpectedly comforting. Even containers have journeys. They carry one harvest north, return with another cargo south, again and again, until careful repairs can no longer keep them whole. The 2 groups continue in opposite directions after sharing news of bridges, weather, and road conditions. Soon, the caravan disappears behind the curve of the valley, leaving only the faint sound of bells hanging from the pack animals' harnesses. The afternoon unfolds peacefully. The road crosses several shallow streams, flowing down from wooded hills before reaching a broad meadow alive with late summer wildflowers. Butterflies drift slowly among purple thistles and white daisies. Grasshoppers leap from the path with each passing step. The air hums gently, with bees gathering nectar before autumn arrives. You find yourself walking almost without effort. The rhythm of the road has become familiar enough that every mile seems to arrive naturally. There is no urgency, only quiet progress. Late in the day, the travellers reach another crossroads, marked by an old oak, whose immense branches spread across nearly the entire meeting place. Several wooden signposts stand nearby, each pointing toward different valleys and settlements. The carvings have faded with time, renewed repeatedly by careful hands, whenever the old letters became difficult to read. Brenos studies them thoughtfully. Many journeys begin here, and many end. A knowing smile lingers on his face. Perhaps, though I think every ending becomes someone else's beginning. You rest briefly beneath the great oak before choosing the southern path once more. The evening camp is made beside a slow-moving stream, bordered by reeds and flowering rushes. Frogs begin calling as the sun slips lower, while dragonflies make their final flights above the water before disappearing into the grasses for the night. A simple stew simmers quietly above the fire. Fresh herbs gathered along the roadside add their fragrance to the meal. As darkness settles, the stream reflects the first stars with such perfect clarity that sky and water appear almost indistinguishable. You listen to the gentle movement of the current and think of every river, forest, village, market, orchard, bridge, and field that has slowly unfolded behind you. The amber road has never hurried to reveal itself. Instead, it has invited you to notice how thousands of ordinary lives, connected by patient travel and quiet exchange, gradually shaped a forgotten path that carried far more than precious stone. It carried trust. It carried memory. And with every peaceful mile, it continues to carry you onward. The fire has faded into a bed of glowing embers, and the last conversations have dissolved into the gentle sounds of the evening. Above you, countless stars stretch across the quiet European sky, just as they have for generations of merchants, pilgrims, shepherds, and travellers who once followed these forgotten paths. Looking back, you realize that the Amber Road was never simply a route for carrying precious golden resin from the Baltic shores to the distant Mediterranean. It was a living thread woven through forests, rivers, valleys, farms, markets, villages, and mountain passes. Every bridge crossed, every shared meal, every carefully tended road, and every quiet exchange between strangers helped connect communities separated by hundreds of miles. The amber itself travelled slowly, changing hands many times before reaching its destination. But along the way, it carried something even more valuable than trade. It carried stories. It carried knowledge. It carried trust between people who spoke different languages, yet understood the simple value of honesty, hospitality, and a careful craftsmanship. You have walked beside patient rivers that shaped the land long before roads appeared. You have rested beneath ancient forests whose timber built wagons, bridges, and homes. You have watched farmers gather harvests, craftsmen polish amber until it glowed like captured sunlight, millers harness flowing water, and merchants greet familiar faces after another successful season upon the road. History rarely moves only through kings, battles, or great cities. More often, it is carried forward by ordinary people, rising with the dawn, caring for their animals, repairing their tools, sharing bread with travelers, and quietly continuing the work that allows countless others to journey safely. As the night grows deeper, the road itself seems to disappear into darkness, not because it has ended, but because it continues beyond the reach of your eyes. Somewhere to the north, waves still wash pieces of ancient amber onto Baltic beaches. Somewhere to the south, merchants still prepare tomorrow's markets. Between them lies the timeless path you have followed, one of Europe's oldest and most enduring connections. The breeze moves gently through the trees one final time, carrying the familiar scent of wood smoke, fresh earth, and distant water. The stars remain overhead, unchanged by the passing centuries, watching over every traveler who has ever walked these peaceful roads. With the journey complete, there is nothing more to carry tonight except the quiet memory of a forgotten road that once connected an entire continent, one careful step at a time. Sleep well.